Good morning, I'm Lisa Chan.
And I'm Joe Vazquez. Welcome back to Weekend Early Edition on UPN Bay Area.
It is 9 a.m. on this Sunday morning, the 19th of March.
Teenagers are overwhelmed with stress. That's according to a local author who has tips for young people on how to get back in balance. That story, and by the way, this story is not just for teenagers. Everyone can learn a lesson from this. We'll have that coming up. Lisa, teenagers in this modern world are being overwhelmed with stress, but there are ways to cope with it. Annie Fox is the author of Too Stressed to Think, a teen guide to staying sane when life makes you crazy. Now, thanks for being here this morning.
Thanks.
Life is crazy enough, but when you're a teenager, there are extra stressors, not to mention hormonal impulses raging through your body. But you make the point in your book that there are ways to confront stress so it doesn't lead to bad decisions.
That's absolutely true. Too many of us have taught our kids how to deal with things such as when you're hungry, you eat. When you're cold, you put on an extra layer. When you're thirsty, make sure you're hydrated. Those kinds of things seem like natural. Take care of yourself. But we don't teach our kids much about what to do when they're feeling stressed because we're not very aware of the physiological signs of stress until it's too late.
And you talk about physiological signs, not only about the brain reaction, but also how your body reacts. Sometimes you freeze up when there is stress, but there are actually physiological reasons for that.
This is news to you, huh?
Well, but I don't think people look at it in that context.
No, they don't.
Why is my heart rate pulsating
Why is my
faster?
stomach feeling really weird?
And you point out that, in fact, when you're under stress, you kick into survival mode, your heartbeat races, and your breathing gets faster because in our evolutionary process, this would have been, fight or flight. Those reactions come forward, and the reason you feel, I'm repeating your book back to you, but the reason you have digestive problems is because that shuts down when you're in fight or flight mode. There's a reason, so there is a way to confront it.
That's right, and it's good for kids to know about this so they don't feel weird, that it's normal, and it's in fact a survival mechanism. It works great if the house is really on fire. If there's a math test in front of you, these kinds of physiological reactions don't help you at all.
Okay, now let's talk about, in your book, you recommend a Get Back in Balance toolkit.
Yes.
I thought this is a great description. Several points you make here. The first one is, if you're under stress, breathe. That seems simple.
It seems very simple, and there's a reason for it. The breathing in a conscious way actually lowers your heart rate. As soon as your heart rate lowers, your brain goes, oh, the building's really not on fire. This is not really life and death. And when that happens, then you have the ability to think about what the problem is and what you can do next.
When you're talking about brain function, there's the survival part of your brain, and then there is the part of your brain that lets you think. So when you breathe, you're able to think. So that's the next point. Think more clearly. Don't just react and follow your impulses. Think.
Right. And it's so important for kids to say, okay, what's the problem right now? What are my goals? What do I want as an outcome for this possible situation right now? And what are my options for getting there? This is a real challenge for teenagers because the part of their brain that can actually predict the consequences of their choices is under construction even in the best of situations. When they're under stress, it's harder for them to think clearly about consequences. But they need to be able to think, if I choose to talk to this person about what's going on, what's a likely consequence of that happening? Think it out ahead of time before, as you say, you just react in a knee-jerk way.
Now, the next thing, I love this, it's called flexing, and we're not talking about flexing muscles, we're talking about how to respond under stress and how to think differently, flex your mind.
Yes, and in a way, it's flexing your attitude. Your attitude may be the way you usually respond to things, and if the way you usually respond when you're stressed out, with anger, for example, and that gets you into more trouble, just flexing a little bit might create a lot of difference in terms of the response you get from your anger.
Before we go to the next one, give us an example of flexing. And again, you think out of the box, right?
Yeah.
So instead of just knee-jerk yelling back, flex.
Well, you've taken your deep breath, and so you're thinking. And suppose you've got a bunch of homework to do, and your sister is jumping on the bed, making a lot of noise, distracting you. Instead of what you normally do, which would be to scream at her, maybe even push her, then you could just calmly say, I've got a lot of homework to do. If you could leave me alone for about 20 minutes, I'd be happy to spend some time with you. You're not yelling at her. She doesn't need to yell back. And believe it or not, she just may leave your room without a fight.
Confused and befuddled at her sister who didn't yell at her, but it might diffuse the situation.
It works.
All right, so the fourth one is choosing, that is, make a decision even in the most complex of situations, there's ways to make a decision. You might need help from a counselor or a parent.
Yes, and once you've thought out what your options are, and you've evaluated for each one of them and say, if I choose option A, is that going to lead to more stress in this situation or less stress? When you can think clearly about those things, then it's time to make a choice. Your choice at the moment might be, I'm going to put this on hold for a while. I'm going to choose not to decide immediately, but come back to it later. That's always an option.
Bottom line, despite how your body feels, which is I must make an urgent decision right now, react, there are tools to slow your body down and make a good decision.
Yeah, and I want to point out also, as you said, this isn't just for teens. All of our bodies and brains react this way under stress. So parents can do a great service to their kids by role modeling much more thoughtful responses to stress.
There's no doubt every teenager should read the book, but every parent should too. I mean, you can learn a lot here in the way you framed it. Hey, quickly, I know you've been asked about this. MySpace.com, of course, has made the news lately, and there's some concern for predators coming in and actually talking to students, but you've listened to a lot of students on this subject. What is your take?
My take is that they are clueless about what they're doing on MySpace. Their intention is that it's a social place and that their friends will be the ones that contact them. They don't see the bigger picture because they are young and very naive. And there is that element out there in the internet world that are looking for kids who make their personal opinions and their personal contact information way too available. So my advice to parents is to be aware of what your adolescents are doing on MySpace, and don't use the excuse, oh, well, he or she knows way more about technology than I do. You know way more about life than they do.
About life, and you need to pass it on. Listen, thanks a lot. Annie Fox, the book is Too Stressed to Think, A Teen Guide to Staying Sane When Life Makes You Crazy. Thanks for being here this morning.
Thank you.